Chapter 19 of A Glimpse of India, from the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19 Birth of an Heir. Agra, January 27, 1893. My dear sister, a very happy event occurred this morning at 3 o'clock. A long-looked-for and much-prayed-for little son came to gladden the hearts and home of the Raja and Rani of Khetri. Not for 100 years has such an event occurred in the royal family. For the past century, the Rajas or governors of the state have been adopted or appointed from a branch of the royal family. The present Raja and father of this little prince was adopted in infancy. The birth of a son in a Hindu family is always a matter of rejoicing. This seems doubly so, as not only the great desire of the parents, but of hundreds of others in the state is met by the coming of this little heir. There is great rejoicing in the camp. Agra, February 25th. A motley crowd of the poor, the lame, the blind and diseased of the city has gathered in the compound, and the highway leading to the house is so crowded that a carriage cannot pass. The day for feeding the hungry people of the city, as a token of gratitude to God for His precious gift of the little prince, has come. Word has been proclaimed that all who will come to the Raja's camp will receive money sufficient for a day's food. Small silver and copper coin and shells, which have a purchasing value, in abundance have been provided, and the servants of the state will distribute them to the crowd. Not knowing the amount of food that would be necessary, it was thought best to give money for the day's food and let the people purchase it in the bazaar. All the servants employed by the state will be remembered by gifts when we return to Khetri. News of the birth of this little heir to the throne has spread throughout Rajputana, and there is a general rejoicing over the much-desired event. Rewari, March 14th. We left Agra on the 9th of this month. As our party is so large, the Raja engaged a special train. There were 200 of us, including the servants. The Raja had 10 horses and 4 fine hunting hounds, besides a female buffalo and the children's 2 dogs and 6 puppies. Rewari is our first stopping place. Tomorrow morning early we shall start for our next place, where we shall be in tents. 3 houses had been engaged for us in Rewari, and we found everything made ready for us. Miss Driver and I are in the government rest house, and as we have our own servants and everything needful for housekeeping, we shall keep house at every stopping place. Rewari is 72 miles from Khetri, and we shall camp 7 times on the way. Stopping so often makes the journey less wearisome, and living in tents is very pleasant at this time of the year, neither too hot nor too cold. We travel slowly on account of the Rani and the baby. In camp, Kori. I was happily surprised this morning by receiving my mail here in my tent, it having been brought from Khetri where it had been collecting for about 10 days. Among other letters and papers, I found yours of February 4th, which I was so glad to read. What a comfort letters are! I value them more every year. Here we are near a small village, tenting under a great banyan tree. Just below us, facing our tent, is a steep range of hills, and on the other side, as far as we can see, are fine wheat and oat fields. The sun is bright and hot this morning. I am sitting in my palki outside the tent, and just in front of me is our good old elephant at the well drinking and throwing water over herself. She really seemed to know us when they brought her to our house in Rewari. She lifted her trunk and made a salam and then began to dance. Many a mile has she carried us and through some dangerous places. Kund. We started early this afternoon, but when we had gone less than a mile, we found it very hot indeed, and I was obliged to leave the elephant and come the rest of the way in my palki. We reached our tents in good time and found them pitched in a very good place. The state quarries are near here with about 200 men at work, so the place has quite an air of business. We leave this evening for our next stopping place, 8 miles from here. Jaipuri. We reached our tents about 9 o'clock last night, all very tired. The Rani and baby have kept well so far, though she feels the weariness of constant travel. The Rani is staying in a temple here and our tents are close by. This is a pretty little village with fine fields of grain surrounding it. No end of people come to take a look at us. We are quite an object of curiosity to them. Our route is rather indirect, and many of the places through which we pass are quite new to us. Saturday. Another resting place. It has become very tiresome unpacking and packing every day. I shall be glad when we reach Khetri. The people of this place are all farmers. They look very strong and are kind and inclined to be social. Many come for medicine which I am glad to give. So many suffer from sore eyes, being always out in the sun and dust. Not having proper treatment, many lose their sight altogether. I took care to bring plenty of eye medicine with me, and I hope it will benefit those to whom I have given it. Our next camping place was a village in the stair of Patiala, which we reached early on Sunday. The people wished to give the Raja in his camp a dinner, but it was declined with thanks, the real motive being that he did not wish to be under obligation to the people of another state. We would have been glad to remain over Sunday, but after some hours' rest, the Raja ordered that the camp move on and we could not remain there alone. Thursday. The Rani is so weary with the journey that we will remain in this place until tomorrow evening, which will give us a rest of 2 nights and 1 day, and we shall feel quite refreshed for the next stage of our journey. We are at a place called Shimali in the Khetri state, 15 miles from the city. I hope to go in tomorrow night, but the Rani will go only halfway, stopping at the rest house there. Crowds of people come around our tents, some asking for medicine and some merely to get a sight of us. Friday. Home. I brought the little prince in my palki last night, and when I made him over to his mother at our stopping place, I asked her to allow me to come on home. Miss Driver remained with the Rani and 2 of the women came with me and my servants. Our new house is not ready for us, and I fear we shall be obliged to remain in this one for some time yet. Saturday. The Rani came in this morning and such a demonstration. 51 guns were fired in salute and the streets were lined with infantry and cavalry, the band playing all the while. Baby is quite unaware of all the parade made over his arrival. Costly gifts of gold and silver vessels, jewels, money, and beautiful garments of rich material are arriving or have been sent by Rajas and family friends according to Oriental custom. Over 5,000 rupees in money and gifts have been received for the little one from friends who have come to visit the Raja or have sent to congratulate him on the birth of a son. The little prince is a fine baby. He gives no trouble and we all love him. I bathe and dress him and look after him almost as much as if he belonged to me. March 28th. An offering to God for His precious gift has been decided upon. 60,000 rupees is to be spent in various ways, in feeding the poor of the state, presents to the servants, and in other benevolences. This custom of the Hindus of making a thank offering for special blessings is worthy of imitation. Sometimes a person upon recovery from a serious illness will call a number of very poor people and feed them as a thank offering to the deity which he or she worships. I am having frequent calls to the city. Some of my visits among the people are very interesting. None seem afraid of me now, and this confidence is a marked contrast to my early experience, when to them a Christian and a foreigner was an object to be avoided. The secretary has asked me to have a church built here. He seems to think it necessary for our comfort to have a suitable place of worship. Perhaps my faith ought to be sufficient for this, trusting for a congregation and a preacher in time. At present, we have a service every Sunday evening on our veranda for our servants and any others who wish to come. This is a great pleasure to us, and so is the English service Sunday mornings. Last Sunday, we read one of Professor Finney's sermons, which was much enjoyed. April 24th. The Rani sent Miss Driver and me 100 rupees each in behalf of her young son, wishing us to use the money for the support of an orphan child in the mission to which we belong. How thoughtful of her to begin so early with her little treasure in benevolent work among her own people. After some study of the needs, I felt inclined to send my 100 rupees to Mrs. Hoskins, the missionary in charge of our native girls' school in Kanpur, with the Rani's request that the money be used for the support of some little girl who had no mother or who had no one to care for her. In reply, the missionary wrote, "Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Yesterday at this hour I was asked to take a little child, but I hesitated because I did not know from whence her support would come. It seemed so truly a case of ought that I finally said, 'Yes, I will take her, the Lord will provide.' And then your letter came. Some time ago an ayah was converted in one of our meetings out in the district. Padri Chuni Lal baptized her, and she immediately began to work for the Lord. She ministered to a poor woman who was ill, caring for her and feeding her 2 hungry young daughters. The woman told her that a Mohammedan had offered her 20 rupees for the 2 girls. This amount looked large, and she was inclined to sell them, but the Christian woman took them all to her home and persuaded the mother to let her send the older girl to me. As soon as she arrived, a missionary lady who was visiting us promised to pay the amount needed for her support. Now the ayah is going away to her home, and your letter makes it possible for me to take the younger girl also." Another little orphan was sent me by one of our preachers. She was so emaciated that I feared she could not live. But with God's blessing, milk, cod liver oil, and soup have brought her through, and we have baptized her, Ruth. She is a dear little girl, readily absorbing gospel truth, and is such a good example to the other children. Would you like to support her for a year or 2? I feel that it will pay. Would you or the Rani like to name the little girl who has not been baptized? God bless the dear Rani and her family. The greatest blessing that I could wish them is that they may know His love. The Rani is very much pleased to know that the money has been so satisfactorily applied. Miss Driver decided to send a part of the money given her to Jerusalem to help a little girls' school there, which is under her church missionary society, and she wrote telling of the birth of the little prince with the request that they would pray that he might grow up to be a good man. End of chapter 19. Recording by Sienna, Fresno, California. Chapter 20 of A Glimpse of India. From the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 20. A Visit to Besau. May 12, 1893. My dear sister, Miss Driver has just come in to breakfast, which we seldom take together, as she usually goes early in the morning to the palace to teach the children and does not return until after my breakfast hour. The Rani is trying to arrange for her elder daughter's engagement. She has been told of a young man, 18 years old, from near where she lived before she was married. She thinks he will be a suitable husband for her daughter. I hope, if it is best, that the engagement may take place, for the marriage arrangements are a great anxiety to the parents. I have had very few patients today, not more than 10 or 12. A dear little boy, 6 years of age, is staying on my veranda. I have twice operated on him for ascites, and I trust that the difficulty is overcome and that I shall be able to send him home soon, quite well. He is a bright little fellow from the country, and he has quite won my heart. I dislike to give him up, for he has been great company for me while I have been alone. I have been out in the city to visit a patient ill with typhoid fever. He has been ill now for 15 days, and I am doubtful about his recovery, for his surroundings are very unfavorable. He is about 20 years old and belongs to a wealthy Mohammedan family, but they live in a most unsanitary manner. There is still considerable interest manifested in my Bible class. On Sunday, our lesson was the 24th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, and the Hindu gentleman who was present acknowledged that he is convinced of the truth of our religion. He said that he is praying daily that God will help him to see the right way, and that in his business matters of late he has had several answers to his prayers, which encourages him to continue to pray. After the lesson is over, we have a short time for conversation, which sometimes seems almost like a class meeting. Smallpox is raging terribly here, principally among children. Yesterday, I vaccinated the Rani's children. I have been vaccinated several times since I was a child, but without results. I think I must try again. Baghor, June 23, 1893. My dear sister, we came up here on the 26th of May with the little prince, intending to stay only a few days. But the place is so much cooler than the city that we have thought best to remain until the rains begin. It hardly seems possible that there could be so much difference in the heat only 5 miles from Khetri. We are 1,400 feet higher than the city, however. We have quite a company here living in tents. Our home is in a bungalow which the Raja built 3 or 4 years ago for himself, as he often comes out this way to shoot tigers. There is but one room and it has 8 outside doors but no windows, and when the doors are all closed, the only light we get comes through the cracks. We keep the doors closed through the hottest part of the day, from 12 until 2 o'clock, while we slip into our dressing gowns and lie down to sleep. This rest is a great boon. I am highly favored in that I have not much to do these days and am not obliged to go out into the heat. While the little prince was so ill in Khetri, my strength was well tested. He is quite well and plump now, and it does not seem possible that he has been so ill. I told the Rani this morning that the baby is now the ruler, that his father, the Prime Minister, and the council have to order all the affairs of the state with reference to him, and that we ourselves and all the servants had to do what would prove best for the little prince. The Rani's youngest daughter takes her tea with me early in the morning, and at 2 o'clock and always expects a piece of short bread with her milk. I enjoy having the children with me. The Rani and I have enjoyable times reading together. The Old Testament is quite like a story to her, and she is never tired of reading it and asking questions. I have been baking bread this morning. It did not bake well but is better than none. It was baked in a small iron oven with coals above and below. I will try again, and the next time I will steam the loaf. I rise about 5 o'clock every morning, take the cream of a quart of buffalo's milk, put it in a teacup and hand it to the cook to make butter for the day. He stirs it with a spoon for about 20 minutes and the butter comes, a nice little ball weighing 1 or 2 ounces. Buffalo milk is very rich if the animal is well fed. The Rani has 2 cows and 1 buffalo here. The cook has just brought my breakfast of cracked wheat, curry and rice. He looks at my new bread as if he thought it a failure. July 14th. We came in from Baghor 2 weeks ago and are glad to be at home again after spending a time in a real tiger jungle. I have felt rather timid since reading of a jungle tiger in southern India, which appeared recently on the railroad track with 2 cubs and killed a native and a European. The brute leaped suddenly from among the bushes and the low growth along the track. We used to sit out at evening until quite dark, until the Rajah sent us word to be careful as there were tigers and leopards on all sides of us. July 18th. On Monday, I left home to go to a native state about 50 miles from here to see a sick child, the heir to the state. His father died about 2 months ago, and it is thought that he was poisoned by his prime minister. His widow, who is the sister of the Rani of Khetri, was married a little more than 2 years ago. She is a young, pretty woman who must now endure the trials and privations of widowhood, which are many and severe. She is very much afraid that her child may also be poisoned. If he lives, her life will be more desirable, but there will be much to endure and it will be hard enough at best. She is supposed to lose all interest in life, take little food and eat but once a day. She must wear a simple wrap of cloth about her body, and the sooner she dies the better pleased will be the people of her state. My journey there was quite enjoyable. I traveled as usual on an elephant or in the palki, with an escort of 30 men on camels and 4 men on horses to lead the way, as we went through fields and byways across the plains. My tent was sent on 20 miles to the place where we were to spend the night. The day was cool and cloudy, and the ride over the hills was inspiring. We reached the tent about 8 o'clock in the evening, crossing a river bed of sand with not a sprig of grass or a shrub to be seen on either side. In the rainy season this is a most dangerous river. I am told that the streams come rushing down from the surrounding hills with such force and swiftness that our elephant could not stand against it. We crossed at 6 o'clock and there was not a drop of water in the river, but soon after we reached my tent, which was little more than a mile from the river, it began to rain and rained hard all night. The wind blew and my tent swayed but did not come down, but my cook's small tent was blown down and the men had quite a serious time putting it up again. Some of our party left home a little later than I did, and when they reached the river they found that they could not cross, so they were obliged to remain on the other side until morning. The 3 women whom the Rani sent to accompany me were in that party, among them the pasband of the late Rajah, a very lovely native woman. She traveled in state, with a horseman riding in front of her conveyance carrying a silver scepter, and her 2 women followed the conveyance on a camel, with the camel train of men servants behind. Although this woman was a concubine of the late Raja, she is greatly respected for her goodness and purity of life. She did not choose the life she was obliged to lead. She is obliged to live like a widow, eats only once a day, dresses only in brown cloth, and spends most of her time in worship. And she must do all this in honor of a man whom she despised. She was a young married girl when he took her away to live in his palace, and her boy husband, whom she loved, died soon after her abduction. The husband's tent was not far from mine, and after her arrival I went to see how she had passed the night and if she had trouble in crossing the river. She said she got on very well, but was glad to have a few hours' rest before starting on again. We did not leave camp until 10:30 in the forenoon. In the meantime my cook brought me a breakfast of native food, and all the people made their bread and ate it. This part of camp life is always interesting to me. I never get tired of seeing the animals fed, and the men make their bread and bake it over the little fires in the camp. They sit down and eat it with much enjoyment, for the jolting of the camels gives them a good appetite. On the 20th, the rain ceased long enough for us to reach Junjun, a city 12 miles distant from our first camp, and I rode all the way on the elephant. We reached the city about 1 o'clock and stopped in an old building belonging to the Thakur of Besau, which is used as offices for the men who attend to suits and other business transactions for him. The rest of the party came up bringing my palki and my servant with the lunch box, and soon my lunch was brought upstairs to the room where I was resting while waiting until it was time to move on. Junjun is a very old city situated at the foot of a hill. There are a few nice buildings belonging to the different Thakurs of the district who come here to attend court or for other business. I noticed the outlines of a very pretty palace which was commenced by Abi Singh, one of the early Rajas of Khetri, but was never finished. After lunch, as we were about to leave, a great crowd of people came about me and began to clamor for medicine, holding up their hands, asking me to notice their pulse and telling me of their ailments. Poor things, how utterly destitute some of them were, suffering for food as well as proper medical care. I felt like staying among them and doing what I could to relieve them, but my stock of medicines soon gave out, and we had to hasten on to our next tent, which was a long way off. It was late when we reached the place, and I found that my tent had not been put up, but the men soon pitched a small hunter's tent for me, and I was glad to lie down on a comfortable cot after my long ride on the elephant. It was too late for me to take dinner, but the rest cooked and ate their food, and finally lay down to sleep. At 3 o'clock, the watchman called out for all in the camp to get up and be ready for an early start. My cook got up and went to the well to bathe and say his prayers. He stumbled and hurt his leg and crawled back to his tent in great pain. One of the servants came to call me, and I, thinking it was only a sprain, gave an order to one of the men to prepare some hot water and foment it. But when I went to him an hour later, I found on second examination that there was dislocation. As I had no chloroform with me, I was obliged to reduce it without, and I got the bone in place the first trial. When we were ready to leave, I had him put on the elephant as he could not ride the camel, but the motion of the elephant caused him much suffering. We arrived in Besau about 10 o'clock and were directed to the palace, where we found a crowd of men to receive us, but not a woman servant appeared. I was asked to go upstairs, and a dozen or more men followed me. I was ushered into a very comfortable room, the walls of which were covered with hideous paintings of all the former Rajas of the state, and in a quiet corner I discovered the portrait of the Raja of Khetri, taken when he was quite young. After some time and a great deal of ceremony, I was asked to go down to the ground floor to see the sick child. The mother was sitting on the floor holding her skeleton child, for the little one had been fed with opium ever since its birth and for some time past had been ill with fever. I remained 3 days with them and left the little fellow somewhat better. The mother promised to send a messenger to me every day or two if I would continue to treat the child. I could not remain longer as the Rani feared that the little prince would need care as he was not well when I left. I was very glad to be able to remain as long as I did, for it seemed such a comfort to the poor mother to have me with her, and she began to be more hopeful about her child. There was a large household of women and a fine opportunity to talk with them and to give books and tracts to those who could read. On our way home, we stayed over Sunday near a village of a few hundred inhabitants, and during the day a great many people came to my tent for medicine and for books. I asked them to sit down and I would tell them something from our religious books. I began to sing a hymn in Hindustani, and some of my servants came and joined in the singing, and then I told the people about Christ feeding the 5,000. They listened most attentively while I told them what they must do to be saved. I must have spoken more than an hour, and when I dismissed them, some remained wanting to hear more. I was much pleased with the priest of the village. He was the only one in the place who could read, so I gave him a number of books, and he promised to call the people together after they returned from the fields at evening and read to them. He is quite a singer and was anxious to learn some of the hymns which we sang. I gave him a hymn book and he learned to sing several hymns from one of my servants. Our journey home was pleasant, and I trust that our visit was profitable to many. I have had news that the little sick child is much better. September 9, 1893. I have been away for about 3 weeks and find myself quite weary, though my journey was a pleasant one. I found that Miss Driver had gotten on very well in my absence. As we have only one cook, I was obliged to take him with me, and the Rani arranged to have Miss Driver's food sent from her kitchen. I had an interesting time at one of my stopping places on the way home. So many people gathered about my tent that I asked them to sit down and listen to some words from my religious book. My servants came near and I asked them to sing a Hindi hymn. This pleased the crowd, and afterward I told them about Jesus, who is the world's Savior. They were very attentive, and I enjoyed talking to them. When I dismissed them, some remained to ask questions. I always carry a small supply of books and tracts as well as medicines, and when I found that some could read, I gave out a number of books and told them that I should expect those who could read to read them to the others. I had a copy of the Life of the Queen of England with a picture of her on the cover, and noticing a very intelligent-looking young man among the company, I gave it to him. He was very much pleased and said that he would read it to the people of his village if he could persuade them to come to him in the evenings. So we plowed the fields and scattered the good seed, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand. End of chapter 20. Recording by Sienna, Fresno, California. Chapter 21 of A Glimpse of India, from the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 21. A Marriage Arrangement. October 6, 1893. My dear sister, the Rani continues to read with me every day or with Miss Driver if I am not able to go to her. My Parsi friend joins us in reading the New Testament. I have not met a native woman so intensely interested in the Bible as the Rani has been the last 2 months. It does not matter what she may be doing when I go there. She leaves it all and calls for her books. The baby is sent away and the servants dismissed for the time, and she reads not only 1 chapter but 2 or 3 before she is willing to stop, and she does not like to pass over anything that she does not understand. She seems to find in the New Testament just what she has been wanting for years. The Raja seems rather anxious over it, but says nothing, for he said in Agra that we might read the Bible with the Rani every day, so I am doing just as he gave me permission to do. He thought the Rani so grounded in the Hindu faith that the reading of the Bible would not move her. He does not understand the change in her mind which has already taken place. November 4, 1893. The Rani is troubled about baby, for the Raja is at home and wants her to part with the little one. It is the custom with these royal people to take the little boys away from their mother at an early age and send them out to the father's apartments and have them cared for entirely by men. They think they will never be brave if they remain in the zanana with their mother and woman servants. The Rani refuses to part with him so early as he has no teeth yet, and he gets ill so easily from the least exposure. I do not know how the matter will end, but I fear the Raja will have his way. Yesterday, the Rani asked my advice about going to visit her mother with the baby, as she had received a letter asking her to come. She says if she goes, she can perhaps arrange to stay with her mother until the little prince is 3 years old. He is very well now and is growing every day. They call him Moti Raj, that is, the pearl of the kingdom. I have spoken to the Rani about going to America, and her reply was, "Not till baby is 5 years old." And when I said I could not stay so long, she said, "You must stay 2 years more, then I will give you leave to go to America for 6 months." 5 years is the usual time for a government servant to remain in the country without taking furlough, and our single lady missionaries have the same rule, so I will stay 1 year more if nothing occurs to call me home. November 18th. I am kept very busy with sick people, and this will continue unless the river is drained, for it is now only a dirty stream of nearly stagnant water. I have asked the Prime Minister to have it drained, and have just heard that 100 rupees had been granted for the purpose, but this will only pay for about a mile of drainage, so I shall have to make another request. I have been this morning to see a nice Brahman woman who has been brought here from a city 10 miles distant to be treated. Her husband, sons and daughters, and servants galore came with her. As I have no house near mine which will accommodate so many people, they will remain in the city. They seem to be a very loving family, quite devoted to each other, and it is a pleasure to visit them. I hope I may be able to help her. They will remain but a few days and will continue the treatment at home, as she is not willing to be separated from her family. They wish me to come to their home once a week, and I shall be glad to do so if I can arrange my work to leave for a day. It will give me a pleasant outing on the elephant. Yesterday I was called to the city to see a woman who had been bitten by a snake, a cobra, but she died before I reached her. As I came from the city, I had to stop to see 2 or 3 other ailing ones, as is usually the case, no matter how hurried I am at the dispensary, and on my return, the Rani sent for me to see her little Bai, the baby. I asked the little one if she felt sick, and she pulled up her little jacket and put her hand over her body in several places, saying she had pain. Then she laughed and ran away. I told the Rani that I was sure the little girl was not in need of medicine. She is so fearful of losing the child that the least thing troubles her. Young as she is, the state recently spent 18,000 rupees in making little Bai's marriage arrangements. January 1, 1894. Dear Sister H., I took breakfast upstairs with Miss Driver in her room as she was not able to come down. We read the 90th Psalm together and had prayers. It was cloudy and cold in the early morning, and only 3 persons came to the dispensary. But after a while the sun came out and I went out on the elephant to visit a patient in a village 1.5 miles distant who is head gardener to a wealthy man. My patient is ill with pneumonia and his surroundings are not conducive to his speedy recovery. There was a cow in the room with him, and just behind his cot was a large hole in the wall just where the wind would blow over him. It is wonderful how much these poor people can endure. Under such circumstances, we could scarcely expect one of our people to recover from such a dangerous disease. My servant, Bhima, has been very faithful in carrying out my orders for this man, and I find him very much better today. I asked to have the cow taken outside and the door opened to air the place, for Bhima had filled the hole in the wall, the only place for fresh air, though in the wrong place. It has been a busy day, putting up prescriptions for the children at the palace and for others, arranging the house, packing my trunk and lunch basket, and settling accounts. This evening I have been up to see the Rani and the children and had a nice little visit with them. Baby begged to come to me at once. Dear little pet, he is a real wellspring of pleasure. It has rained so much that it has been impossible to get camels for the men and luggage, so I may not get off tomorrow as I hoped and expected. Camp Naranol, January 4th. 2 Mohammedan dancing women came to the dispensary this morning. One of them is a bright-appearing young woman, rather refined in her manners. She said that she fell off a camel 15 days ago and has suffered great pain ever since. I found she had been severely injured by the fall and I fear she will not soon recover. She handed me 2 rupees as she was leaving, and I was about to refuse it when I remembered that women of her profession are never poor. The camels came at 10 o'clock and we were soon on the way, taking the road by Nalpore instead of by Shimala, as it is much shorter, and arriving at Naranol at 6 o'clock, just before dark. January 5th. I had a good night's rest and we left early this morning as we had 26 miles of travel to this place, Kund, where we arrived at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I came 6 miles in my palki and the rest of the way on the elephant. The palki bearers lagged behind, so I had no choice but to take the 20 miles in this way, but I was too tired to speak when I arrived here. My head man gave the bearers a good scolding and said he would report them when he got back to Khetri. After a refreshing cup of tea, I changed my dress and went to call on Mrs. Seal. She was glad to see me and asked me to spend the night with her instead of in my tent, which I was glad to do. I had brought her a Christmas cake and 100 fine large oranges and some sweets for the children. About 1/4 mile from Mrs. Seal's house are the slate quarries where a great many men are employed in getting out slate for roofing and flooring. Mr. Seal has the slate carried on camels to Rewari, the nearest railway station. Kanpur, January 7th. I left Rewari at 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon and reached Delhi at 3 and took the mail train for Kanpur at 9 o'clock in the evening and arrived here at 6 this morning. I am feeling quite well after my journey and am ready to go to conference. I am staying with my old friend, Mrs. Hoskins. It seems so good to see the old friendly faces after 8 months of native surroundings. I will mail this today and write you about the conference in my next letter. Khetri, January 27, 1894. My dear sister, your last letter reached me at Kanpur while I was at the conference. I returned here on the 20th in a hard rainstorm. My journey and the meeting with the friends of other days have quite refreshed me. The conference meetings were very profitable. The ladies' conference met every morning at 11 and continued till 2 o'clock. There was much discussion and planning over the estimates and appropriations, for some of the ladies who have an extensive work are left without money to carry it on. I do not know how this could have happened, for the executive committee at home are generally very careful to see that each department of work has its share of the appropriation. During the year 1893, the conversions and baptisms in the North India and the Northwest India conferences numbered over 18,000. Nearly all of these converts are from the lower classes and are quite illiterate, so they must be taught to read and instructed in spiritual things. Think of all that must be accomplished by a few missionary workers. Yet, if this teaching is neglected, many of these people will return to their heathen customs and so bring disgrace on the Christian religion. The conference plans to send a native pastor or teacher to the villages where there are Christians to teach them to read the scriptures and to preach to them. It is wonderful how much they can learn in a year, but their brain power has never been overtaxed. The Rani gained her point about the little prince and she still has him with her. This is his birthday, dear little fellow. His first year of life has been a hard one. He is not well now, for his teeth are troubling him and he has fever again. The guns are firing from the fort in honor of the return of the Raja, who went to Bombay in December to meet the Nawab of Rampur, who was just returned from America. We are having a cold season for this part of India. Water has frozen at night and vegetables and flowers are frosted. I wrote you last June that the Rani was sending some of her men and a Brahman woman to a native state to see if an arrangement could be made for the engagement of her eldest daughter with the son of the Raja of Shapuri. It has taken all this time to manage the affair. 3 or 4 times men have gone back and forth, and the matter has been fully discussed by both parties. First, the inquiry was about the girl's looks. Was she a beauty or was she plain looking? Then about her disposition. Had she her mother's temper or her father's? Can she read and is she really clever? If all is satisfactory so far, then comes the real business. How much is the Raja willing to spend on the wedding? What dowry will he give? Will it be in money or jewels? All this is now settled. They will spend 110,000 rupees, mostly in money and jewels. Then the Raja of Khetri presents his requests. He wishes his daughter to have yearly 10,000 rupees for her own private pocket money, and he does not wish the marriage to take place until she enters her 14th year. On the answer to these requests hangs the future of dear Bai. If the father of the young man consents to give the yearly allowance desired and to wait until the time stated for the marriage, then the arrangement will be completed. It seems a very good opportunity for Bai. The Raja of Shapuri has taken great care of his son and had him educated in the Ajmer College under an English gentleman who has had constant oversight of him, and it is said that the young man has no bad habits. He is 18 years old and Bai is nearly 12. Neither the Raja nor his son are idol worshippers. They belong to the Arya Samaj, a sect which does not believe at all in the Son of God, but does believe in worshipping God alone. I think it will be easier for Bai with the teaching she has had to go into this family than into a bigoted Hindu family where she would be obliged to worship the household gods. Dear little girl, she wants to serve God in the right way and to do right, but she will have many trials, even in this family which she is about to enter, for they are far from Christ. February 8, 1894. My dear M., the Rajah's secretary has just come to ask me to go with the Rani's two little girls and the Parsi and his wife to the new reservoir. He has had tents pitched for us and we will take our tea things and have tea there and then have a boat ride. This being a holiday, he thought we ought to celebrate in some way. Miss Driver will not be able to go as it has been raining and is too damp and cold for her. Baby has cut one upper tooth and he has been vaccinated and has been rather ill with both these troubles, but he is better today. The Rani and I finished the reading of the New Testament yesterday. The Rani seems very happy. She was out to the reservoir a short time ago and one evening the Rajah sent all the men away from the place and took her down and showed her the masonry and explained the works to her. She enjoyed these few days in the country and came home refreshed and pleased with her visit. We were invited to go with her, but it was difficult to get men enough to carry the palkis on so short a notice, and it was too hot for us to go on the elephant, so we declined. The Rajah's men have caught the tigress, of which we were so much afraid when at the country seat last summer. She was seen going into one of the copper mines, and 20 men were sent out to entrap her. They placed a strong cage over the opening of the mine and watched for several days, and at last she ventured to come up into the cage. We are glad to have her caught, but do not like to have the creature become a resident of Khetri and live near us. A stronger cage has been prepared, but I do not think any bars can securely hold a fierce jungle tiger. My ayah has just come in to say that the men have arrived with the tigress and have taken it to the gateway of the Rani's palace, and she has been down to look at it. I hope they will not send it down here for me to see. February 22nd. The birthday of the little prince was celebrated on the 14th of this month, though he was born on the 27th of January. The real birthday is not celebrated among the Hindus, but their pandit or priest appoints a propitious day. A durbar or reception was held for him, and the men and children who came were dressed in bright yellow coats, making a brilliant-looking company. The baby prince wore a little yellow silk coat and pants. Such a little mite in pants looked very comical. Presents of various kinds and money were brought, every one giving according to his salary. End of chapter 21. Recording by Sienna, Fresno, California. Chapter 22 of A Glimpse of India, from the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 22. A Royal Wedding. Khetri, Rajputana, India, June 22, 1894. My dear Miss J., your letter of March 1st reached me in April, and as soon as I had finished reading it, I wrote one sheet in answer and then was called away. Now I will make another trial, which I hope may be successful. I think our kind father put it into your heart to write to me, for your letter did me much good. It was so natural and so cheery. I have felt a fresh inspiration ever since. The thought of the crocuses and snowdrops of my youthful days sometimes gives me a longing for the homeland. I have been without a companion since the 19th of February. Miss Driver, who had been with me 4 years, was obliged to take a change, but she did not expect to be away so long and I thought I could stay alone for a short time. When I learned that she was too ill to return, I tried to get someone to spend the hot season with me, but no one seemed willing to take the long journey in the great heat, so I have been alone with natives all around me. None of them are Christians, and I have felt the isolation very much and have longed sometimes for someone to speak with in my own language. Letters have been a great boon, and so have my home papers and books. You wish to know of my surroundings. First, I will tell you about our new house, which has been in process of building for over 4 years and is not completed yet, though it is so nearly finished that I moved into it at the beginning of the hot weather. It is a stone building, the walls, roof, and door casings all of stone, no wood about it except the doors. There is a drawing room 30 feet by 20 and a bedroom on each side of this 20 by 20. Behind the drawing room is the dining room, 20 by 20 feet. A lovely room with one fine arch. The walls are colored buff, paneled with orange and white. It is very pretty and is much admired by the natives. The drawing room is a deep rose color paneled with white, and the arches are prettily decorated. The bedrooms are pale rose and white. Over each door is an arch filled in with white glass, and the upper half of the doors are glass. The rooms are 18 feet in height. The house stands on a rock and is higher than the palace or any other house in this part of the town, and we were hoping that on account of the height it would be very cool, but the rocks around it absorb the heat, so it is not as cool as we thought it would be. It will be more comfortable in the cold season. From the veranda and the house top we have a fine view of Khetri, which is a city of 6,000 inhabitants. Its site is elevated, and in the rainy season the dark green foliage in the background extending over the surrounding hills makes a varied and pleasing landscape, while the light yellow hills formed of sand blown in waves from the desert add to the artistic effect. The houses of the city are of stone, many of them plastered outside and whitewashed. A number of handsome temples can be seen from the house. In the rest houses are other temples, one of which is tastefully decorated in colors with kiosks and minarets. At evening the gongs are struck for prayers. It reminds me of home and is the only familiar sound I hear in this faraway place. There are no wild flowers here, and English flowers, especially annuals, do not come to perfection. Creepers and flowering shrubs grow well, and there are some very beautiful flowering trees. The flowers from the babul tree are just beginning to drop, and I will enclose a pressed one. Just now I have neither garden nor potted plants, and there is really no place for a garden, but I hope to have potted plants in the veranda in the cold season. The palace is so near that I often walk over there in the evening. The Rajah has only one wife, a bright and clever woman. She has 2 daughters and a son 17 months old. The older girl will be 12 years old in September, and the younger one 6 in January. Both of them are betrothed, and the older one, a dear little girl, will be married when she enters her 14th year. The lady who was with me was her governess. She has been taking music lessons and learning English, and she reads well in her own language. On Sunday she made a cap for her little brother and ornamented it on the crown with a pink and blue hen worked in wool, and around the top she worked the motto, "God is love." This was all her own idea. She has not learned to keep the Sabbath and thought it was all right to make the cap, but she wished in some way to have God connected with it. She is fond of learning verses of scripture and has a much prized book in which she writes them. The younger princess is bright and playful. She has a number of dolls which she sets up in a row, and in her funny way she teaches them the 10 Commandments and the Lord's Prayer. But it is the little prince who is the great treasure of the household and the mother's idol. He does not yet walk because he is always in someone's arms, and whatever he cries for he gets whether it is good for him or not. So he keeps his doctor busy putting up prescriptions for indigestion, sleeplessness, and various other ailments. Notwithstanding all the bad management, he is a sweet little fellow, very affectionate, and a great pet with us all. I have a small dispensary where I receive patients up to 12 o'clock. After that they come to my house at all hours of the day. For many come a long distance, from the country and the surrounding villages, and this is one reason why I have been so long in answering your letter. I cannot do much in this great heat but look after the sick. Though my out practice is not very extensive at this time, yet it takes much time to go among the people, and I have only 6 men to carry my palki, and twice a day is as often as they can carry me any distance. I have a little zanana work at evening, which I much enjoy, and always a service on Sunday for my servants and any others who wish to attend. We had interesting meetings last Sunday, and all joined heartily in the hymns. Some of the men are excellent singers. Agra, December 12, 1894. Dear Sister, we are all in Agra, and the Rani had planned for us to stay here until it was time for us to go to the hills for the hot season, but an unforeseen difficulty has arisen, and she expects now to return to Khetri in a few weeks to marry their daughter. At the time of her betrothal, it was arranged that the marriage should not take place until next October, when Bai would be 13 years old. The young man is now 20, and he thinks he must be married, and his father threatens to break the engagement and make another arrangement for his son if the Raja does not allow his daughter's marriage to take place early in the year. This would be expensive for the Raja, as he has already given a part of the marriage dowry, so it seems necessary to consent. Poor Bai! It seems dreadful for a child of only 12 years to be married. The Rani does not like the thought of Bai being taken away so young, but she says they are forced to agree to it, as this young man seems to be the only suitable person for Bai in all Rajputana. Physically, Bai is as well developed as an American girl of 16, but in mind she is not as mature and still prefers her dolls and play and her lessons to anything else. She will probably have a governess and go on with her lessons after she goes to her husband's house. The Raja comes soon to make purchases for the wedding. 19th. The Rani and Raja are very busy in selecting and buying jewels and clothing for their daughter. Nothing seems to make native people so happy as to have an occasion to buy jewels. They call jewelers from different cities and take great delight in the varieties of beautiful ornaments that are sent into the zanana. Trays of them are brought in worth thousands of rupees, necklaces, bangles, head ornaments, jewels for the hands and feet, the toes and ankles, some in most curious designs. The state buys the jewels after the Raja and Rani have selected them. Emeralds, pearls, and diamonds are the Rani's choice. Their present for the bridegroom is an emerald necklace, worth, they say, 3,000 rupees, and for their daughter they have bought a necklace and bracelet set with pearls and diamonds, beautiful to look at but so heavy. I am often asked to let them see how the jewels look on a white person. Great preparations are being made for the wedding. 20,000 rupees worth of jewels are to be given, besides quantities of clothing, silverware, and other things. The wedding will not cost less than 100,000 rupees. All the arrangements will be made by the state officials. Khetri, January 28, 1895. My dear sister, we are in the midst of the great preparations for the wedding of the princess. These have been going on several weeks, and this is Monday, only 2 days before the ceremony. Already guests are beginning to arrive. The Rani's sister came on Saturday with 400 attendants, consisting of noblemen, state officials, and servants with all their trappings. There were 3 elephants and, I think, 200 camels, besides horses, oxen, and a number of conveyances. This is Oriental style. On a grand wedding occasion, guests bring all the grand things they have in order to make a fine show. They think it adds to their dignity and importance. These people were invited to come 4 days before the wedding, and they will be entertained and their servants and animals fed and cared for until after the marriage. Several others are expected to arrive today. The Raja of Sekor has already sent 100 fine horses and will arrive today with about 1,000 people, 300 camels, oxen, tents, horses, carriages, and elephants. The Maharaja of Jodhpur will arrive the day after the wedding, as the Raja and his suite cannot go out to meet him in proper style before that time. We have come down into our old home and put our new house in order for the Maharaja. On Wednesday, the day of the ceremony, the Raja and his men will go out to receive the bridegroom and his father's family. The people of Khetri will go out about a mile, and the returning procession will number about 6,000 people on elephants, camels, and horses, all clad in bright colors. Yellow is the color representing joy and gladness. The gates of the palace gardens are trimmed with red, green, and yellow cloth, and all Khetri is looking very bright and pretty. The roads have been repaired and many of the buildings and the filthy places made clean and wholesome for the grand occasion. But our poor little princess is sad at the thought that she must so soon leave her home and her mother. She cries a great deal, and the Raja, I hear, begins to feel her leaving very much, and sheds tears with her. Khetri will be very lonely for us all without our little Bai. She was only 2.5 years old when I came here 10 years ago in March. Bai would like Miss Driver to go with her to her new home and stay for a while, and perhaps she will do so if she is well enough. The walks and drives in the public garden have been nicely done up, and the Raja has purchased a beautiful fountain to be placed on the circular lawn. Men are still at work on the roads and in the gardens. I have had nothing to do except to arrange the Rani's drawing room and the one in our house for the Maharaja of Jodhpur, who is somewhat accustomed to English ways. So I helped to arrange the rooms a little after our style. I will finish this after the wedding. February 5th. There was an immense number of people present for more than a week to attend the ceremonies. I will give you an idea in figures, which the secretary has given me. The bridegroom's party consisted of 2,500 people who brought 300 camels, 9 elephants, 500 horses, and 50 pairs of bullocks attached to conveyances. These all came with him from his father's city. On the invitation of the Raja of Khetri, there came over 7,900 people, bringing with them nearly 2,000 horses, 1,900 camels, 12 elephants, and 78 pairs of bullocks with conveyances. All these people and their animals were fed for more than a week by the state. Besides the invited guests, there were many thousands who came in to witness the grand procession when the bridegroom came. The Raja and several thousand of his people went to meet him with their horses, elephants, and bullocks, and the state cavalry and infantry helped to form the procession, headed by a brass band. When the two processions met about 2 miles from the city, a cannon was fired to announce the meeting. The bridegroom alighted from his horse and mounted an elephant, and a golden umbrella was held over him, and golden fans waved to keep flies away. It was a fine sight as they entered the city. Guns were fired and the horses were prancing, but no one in all the crowd was hurt, so far as I have heard. February 15th. My dear Miss G, the wedding of the princess took place on the 30th of last month, but there were other ceremonies which continued several days, so it seemed most tedious. I think poor Bai must feel most thoroughly married after all the ceremonies she has had to pass through. She had to sit nearly 3 hours under a red canopy beside the bridegroom, with her face covered, while the priest read pages of Sanskrit which not a person present except the priests could understand, and they constantly disputed the meaning. Ghee was burned and different flowers used, which perhaps had a special meaning, but I have not found anyone yet who could explain their significance. Near the end of the ceremony, the Raja sat inside under the canopy, and the Rani outside in a small enclosure, and they were connected to each other by a silken cord, showing that their daughter Bai was a legal child. Carpets were spread on the ground in the court of the Rani's palace, under the red cloth canopy which was arranged for the marriage, and in the center of this stood a table with the jewels, the wedding presents, and near the table on the carpet the display of silver articles was prettily arranged. A small silver table about a foot high, a large silver urn for drinking water which would hold 10 or 12 quarts, a gold drinking vessel, a beautiful silver bedstead with a green and purple mattress and pillows of rich velvet, tied at each post with a silver cord and tassels, were among the presents. The bride and groom sat on this bedstead, while the Rajas and people of note came in and presented their gifts of money in gold and silver. The bride sat veiled, and her husband received the gifts for her. There were bags of rupees near the table containing 40,000 rupees in cash. The bags were made of clean white cloth and each held 2,000 rupees. Next came the clothing: 60 suits for the bride, full large skirts trimmed with gold lace, and scores of lovely chadars or veils of fine, thin material. Then there were numbers of shawls, turbans, and cloths for the servants, and some to give away. There must have been several hundred of these, all nicely folded and placed in order. There were boxes of different sizes, trunks of leather and of wood, cooking utensils, lamps, and many things I cannot name. Women servants stood around holding lighted torches, so the place was well lighted and everything could be seen to advantage. The Zanana women were requested to retire. Then the Raja came in, followed by his royal guests, then others of note, and so on, till the place was crowded. After viewing the things for a few minutes, the Raja formed them all into a procession, and they walked around the presents in single file, taking a good look at everything. When they all went out, the Raja asked Miss Driver to guard the silver, and me to stand by the jewels, while the women passed around to view them. There were so many women servants in the crowd that there was danger of theft. It was rather late when all this was over, but to me it seemed a prettier sight than the wedding itself. The state, I hear, gave 20,000 rupees worth of jewels. The Rani gave 5,000 and the Raja gave his share. Each Raja who was invited gave jewels and clothing, an elephant and 8 horses, and a sum of money, and each guest gave according to his position in society. The jewels were very fine, especially those given by the state and the parents. The Raja and Rani have very fine taste in their selection of jewels. Poor little Bai, only 12 years old and such a host of things to care for. A list of her jewels and all the other things was written and given to her. She took 100 men and women from Khetri with her when she went to her husband's home. All her servants are from Khetri. We hear that Bai is very happy, but no one knows whether it is true or not. The native doctor here has had a stroke of paralysis, and I am now looking after him. He begins to improve a little, and I trust that he may partially recover, but he is an opium eater and takes wine too, so his chance of recovery is not as good as it would be if he had not indulged in these habits. Camp Rewari, April 8, 1895. My dear M., I left Khetri on the 30th of March and arrived here on the 3rd of this month, on my way to Mount Abu to spend the hot season. The Rani was not ready to start when I did, and she only came in last evening. It was getting so hot that I did not like to wait longer, as after the hot winds begin to blow, even night traveling is exceedingly uncomfortable. May 9th. We did not reach Abu till the 17th of April, and I have been busy getting settled, receiving and making calls, attending meetings, and looking after the children and the sick people in our camp. I must tell you how pleasantly I am settled here. Before we left Khetri, I told the Raja that I would like him to hire a house for me if he wished me to go to Abu with the family, for I was unwilling to go to a hotel among gay and fashionable people for 2 or 3 months, and he has rented this house which suits me perfectly. It belongs to an English lady who is a very earnest Christian. She devotes much of her time to spiritual work, visiting the soldiers' hospital and many families where she reads the Bible to them. The house has a large hall which is set apart for service for dissenters, as those people are called who do not belong to the established church. Every Friday evening there is a Bible class in the hall with a good number in attendance, and every morning we have a short service there. At first, only 3 women and 1 man came to the meeting, but we prayed for the outpouring of the Spirit upon the people of Abu, and God has blessed our faith. 2 persons have been converted, and several others have been led to attend the Wednesday and Sunday evening services. There is but 1 church edifice here, and the clergyman this season is very ritualistic. The Rani has a very pleasant place about half a mile away. Bai Sahiba and her husband are here, and her parents are very happy with their 3 children. The little prince is learning English, and we are all teaching him words. His pronunciation is very funny sometimes. I am afraid we shall spoil him for governor of the state, and he has already spoiled me for America. I do not see how I shall get on without him. Last evening I called on the Ranis of Serohi. The Raja of Serohi owns the whole of Abu, which is a part of his state. He has 2 wives, one of whom has a little boy of 7 years. The younger wife has 2 little girls, one 6 and one 4 years, and the little son about 3 years old. All of them are beautiful children. 2 European women have charge of them, One teaches them and the other looks after their clothes and has a general oversight of them. Both the Ranis are rather pretty and somewhat refined. Each has her separate apartments, separate servants, and separate purses. They have a nice house furnished throughout with English furniture. The Raja treats them kindly and seems fond of all the children, but I hear that he loves the first wife best, and of course her son is the heir. The Raja and Rani of Khetri would like to make a marriage arrangement for their son with the youngest daughter of the Serohi Raja, which would be very suitable, for the little girl will be educated and so will our little prince. I have been asked to speak to the European woman in charge of the children about bringing about an arrangement. Fancy my making a marriage arrangement for a child 2.5 years old. In conversation with the woman, I found that the little girl's marriage arrangement is already made. July 4th. I have just remembered that this is the day when you all feel your independence. I hope you are having a pleasant day. My engagement with the Khetri state expires on the 8th of October, but I may not be able to leave until January, where our conference will meet in Meerut. But I want to attend that and then get my luggage off to Bombay, where it will remain until I sail. I have not told you what a pleasure it was to us all to have Bai Sahiba with us. She and her husband came to Abu and stayed 6 weeks. She seems very happy in her new relation. Her husband is very kind and indulgent, and it appears to be a very suitable marriage. Bai is glad to be with her parents and her little sister and brother who are so dear to her. She will go home with us to Khetri and spend several weeks, and she wishes me to engage a person to teach her painting while she is there. While in Abu, I sent to Bombay and got a book on watercolor painting and a box of paints, thinking it would amuse the children when they were not at their lessons, and it proved to be a pleasure to the parents as well as the children. They all sat at a table together, and the Raja tried to outdo the Rani in picture painting, while the children were just as much in earnest in their endeavor to see which could paint the prettiest bird or animal. Enthusiasm ran high for a time. Bai Sahiba has done well in music, and I do not doubt that she will make a success in painting, for she applies herself well to anything which she undertakes. End of chapter 22. Recording by Sienna, Fresno, California. Chapter 23 of A Glimpse of India, from the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 23 Last Days. Khetri, September 29, 1895. My dear sister, my days are so much alike that there is not much variety in my letters, I fear. The daily round is much the same. We had our usual Sunday service yesterday, and I will tell you of a little incident which will interest you. A Brahman from the city came in and seemed inclined to talk. He said that he received great benefit from having an idol in his house, and asked my opinion of idol worship. He said that when he entered his house and saw the idol, it helped to remind him of his hour for prayer. I said that God had given us so many reminders of Himself in nature that it did not seem necessary to have an idol, the work of men's hands, to remind us to speak to Him. I referred him to the beautiful green hills around us, the trees and flowers, and the fields so rich in color, and asked him if these were not sufficient to make us think of God and to fill our hearts with praise and prayer. I then turned to the commandments in the Hindi Bible and read them aloud to show him that I could not believe in idols when God had so strictly forbidden us to make any image, to bow down to any likeness of anything to worship it. After I had again read the first and second commandment, he had nothing more to say, but listened attentively while we read and explained a few verses of the 6th chapter of Matthew and repeated the Lord's Prayer. He seemed to get a new idea, and when we sang Jesus, Savior of my soul in Hindi, he joined most heartily. I am anxious to see if he will come again next Sunday, for he seemed much impressed. Baby has got 2 more teeth. He was ill for a few days, but is better now and is running about with the chicken under each arm. Our little Bai is quite ill, and I feel troubled about her. She is so delicate that she will not be able to stand a severe illness. The Rani is very unhappy over my leaving. She really begins to believe that I will go to America, and she is wondering whom she can get in my place, and if they will like another doctor. She makes herself very unhappy over it, hoping, I think, that her sorrow will make me change my mind about leaving. 30th. We are having very hot days and no rain. I have had a very busy morning. Just after my early cup of tea, I went to the city to see a wee baby who has sore mouth and eyes. On my way home, I stopped at the palace to see the children, but found that the Raja was in with them, so I did not wait. A number of sad cases have come to the dispensary, some of them so hopeless that I long for the marvelous gift of healing. They come with such faith that I can heal them, and I have to tell them that medicine cannot cure them. To comfort them, I give some simple remedy. Among the patients this morning was a little boy with softening of the bones, who was brought to me from a distant village. Yesterday, a young man 16 years of age was brought who had the same trouble. Both are Hindus and never take animal food. I cannot persuade them to change their diet, for their friends would rather let them die than have them taste meat or eggs. Just after my last patients had gone, I was called to the palace. The Raja wanted to ask me about the hill stations, which would be the most suitable for them to go to next hot season. The Rani is so determined to leave Khetri in January when I do, that the Raja thinks it best to decide on a place and then let the Rani go to the nearest plains station and stay there until it is time to go up to the hills. They finally decided on Almora, beyond Naini Tal, and they will go to Bareilly and remain there until the hot season. The Raja asked if I would not stay and go to the hills and get a little stronger before going to America. I told him I thought my native climate would be the best for me. Then he said, "You ought not to remain in America more than a year. You should then come back to us." I replied, "I am getting old enough to go to heaven before many years." "Yes," he said, "but India is just as near heaven as America. You can go to heaven from here." He seems to think that I must stay with them as long as I live. I shall be very sorry to leave them, especially the children. October 28th. I have secured a young lady to give Bai Sahiba painting lessons. She came from Meerut accompanied by her mother, and they will probably remain permanently, as the Rani would like the young lady to be governess and companion for little Bai. The 2 women are living with me. One day last week, we went out with a party to hunt leopards. The place was not more than 2 miles from our home, but we had to go up and down very steep hills and some sand hills. 2 leopards were shot by the Raja and his men, but we were at a safe distance on our elephant and not in any danger. It was quite exciting when the men beat the jungle and the leopards came out, running here and there to save themselves while the Raja and his party were firing at them. After the leopards were dead, the men brought them to us. One of them was a young one and very prettily marked, The others seemed quite old. Before the skins were taken off, they were taken to the court of the Rani's palace for her and the children to see. The Raja is very proud of his tiger and leopard skins. We enjoyed the outing very much. It was quite a change for us. Another day, I had to go out to a village 8 miles away to see a sick woman. The Raja's secretary made arrangements for us to stop in a native serai in the village, and he sent out a rug for the floor and some chairs, and we took cushions and pillows. The mattress from the elephant, spread on the floor, gave us a nice place to rest. We took our lunch with us, and the secretary sent us some of his food, which we enjoyed very much. One dish was artichokes cooked in butter and lemon juice, and another was string beans cooked in the same way. A crowd of people came to see us, many of them with ailments of different kinds, and all clamoring for medicine. I went to see my sick woman in her house and ministered to her, and was called to see another woman, so it was rather a busy day. We took another road coming home, which led us through stony ravines and up such steep hills that we sometimes found it hard to keep our seat on the elephant. One hill was so steep and so long that we all dismounted and walked rather than run the risk of falling off backward. The Maharaja of Jodhpur died suddenly about 12 days ago, and the Raja has gone there as he and the Maharaja were warm friends. The chief friends of the deceased were invited to meet in Jodhpur on the 12th day after the death to condole with the family and join in the feast to be given when the days of mourning are over. All mourning ends with the feast. The weather is much cooler and we are all able to do more work. These rides out into the country do us much good. We hope to go out again some day this week. I shall miss my patient old elephant when I leave Khetri. I feel quite attached to her. She has been so faithful and has so many times carried us so carefully over and through really dangerous places. Khetri, November 29th. Your letter of October 9th came 3 weeks ago, and I must try to answer by this next mail. I am just as busy as ever. Last week, we moved down to our old house in order to give up ours to the Agent General of Rajputana, who came here for 3 days. It was the proper thing to do, but it made a great deal of extra work for me. I had to pack and put away in the storeroom things that we did not need to take with us, and the extra furniture was put away to make room for better things from the palace. The carriage drive from the palace gardens up to our house was bordered with flags on poles, which were wound with bright-colored cloth, and there were 6 larger flags flying from the top of our house. The agent comes into Khetri in great style. The Raja goes out a mile to meet him with carriage and horses, elephants and horsemen, and when they meet, guns are fired. The Raja and the agent mount the state elephant and seat themselves in the state bauda, which is made of silver and gold, and the man sits at the back and waves a big yak tail over them. 11 guns were fired when they reached the house and dismounted. The Raja escorted the agent up the steps and into our drawing room, then left him and went to the palace, and in the afternoon they exchanged calls. Then came the Grand Durbar at 4 o'clock, and after that a drive to the gardens. The agent dined alone in our beautiful yellow drawing room in the evening. On Monday evening, the Raja gave a grand dinner at the palace, to which we were invited but did not go. Although we were not at the dinner, we were at the palace with the Rani in a room so arranged with a curtain that we could see the agent at his dinner. This is a treat the Rani enjoys, to see the table arrangements and people eating with knife and fork. After dinner, there were fireworks and the whole city was illuminated, and the palace was one glow of light. The fort on a hill 1,200 feet above the city was illuminated and was a beautiful sight. We went up on the roof of the palace where we could see the whole display. Baby has a cold and fever, and I remained at the palace all night to see that the medicines were properly given. This morning he is better. There is great anxiety when anything is the matter with him. I get quite tired with running back and forth between my house and the palace. The day I have chosen for my departure from Khetri is, in the estimation of the friends here, an auspicious one for starting on a journey in the direction in which I shall travel. And as the state arranges for my journey as far as the railway station, I must wait until the Pandit announces an auspicious day for traveling south. Remaining here a few days longer will not interfere with my steamer arrangements, and it will save my friends here some anxiety, for they believe that I should certainly meet with an accident if I should start on a day which the Pandits consider unfavorable. Metropole Hotel, Agra, December 25, 1895. My dear sister, this is Christmas Day, as you see. But if I wish you a Merry Christmas, the day will not only be gone before this reaches you, but the year 1895 will have passed away, and 1896 will be nearly a month old. So I will wish you a joyous and happy New Year, such as one as God wishes all His children to have, with so much of His Spirit and life dwelling in us that nothing shall offend us, and we may rejoice always. It is the custom here to send Christmas cards and greetings the first thing in the morning, and to friends at a distance we send by mail so that they will get our greetings by the morning delivery. Christmas bells began to ring at 9 o'clock for morning service. We had a very good Christmas service in our church, a good sermon and responsive readings from Isaiah 9th chapter and Luke 2nd chapter. The hymns were beautiful and heartily sang. The text was the 6th verse of Isaiah 9. Our minister is a talented Anglo-Indian, well-educated and a good preacher. The congregation includes Irish, Scotch and English soldiers, some Anglo-Indians and Hindustanis, and one American, always when she is in from Khetri. Bishop Thoburn is holding the Bombay Conference this week, and on January 3rd, the North India Conference will meet in Moradabad. On the 10th, the Northwest India Conference meets in Meerut. This is the conference to which I belong. January 24, 1896. A week ago, I returned from the conference, the last one probably, which I shall attend in India. Bishop Walden and his wife from America, Mother Nind, who has been visiting our Eastern missions, and her traveling companion, Miss Baucus of Japan, and Reverend Spencer Lewis, and family of China were present. One of the sessions of the conference was given to a self-support demonstration. 27 of the native ministers had been for the past year depending for their support on the native congregations to which they minister, and they were called forward to give their experience and to let us see that they had been as well cared for as those who had been on regular salary. Toward the close of the meeting, the specimens of their industries which had been brought by the native Christians to be sold for the benefit of the self-support fund were sold at auction, and quite a sum netted to begin the work of the next year. The things were arranged in the chapel hall of the school building. There were small cotton rugs from the weavers, shoes from the shoemakers, some fine deerskins given by a licensed hunter, goat skins nicely prepared, a few chickens, baskets of eggs, jars of flour and other grains, stamped cloth, fans made by the women, some beautiful darned lace, and various other things. Everything was sold. This to me was quite a new phase of mission work. These self-support ministers have no fixed sum to their credit, but take what their people give them. Quite a number of the people present are leaving for America soon, some of them from our missions, North and South India, and the China and Japan missionaries, together with the visitors from America. I expect to sail with one company on March 23rd. I am staying with Miss Yorbury, who was one of my students 14 years ago. She attended the Madras Medical College for 4 years and passed her examinations there and then had 5 years in the Dufferin Hospital. After that, she went to England and Germany and took her degree and returned to India a year ago and now holds the senior position in the Lady Lyle Hospital. She was born in India of English parents who died when she was young. While with me as a patient in Bareilly, I persuaded her to study medicine. She is one of the most successful lady practitioners, popular with the natives, and is doing a fine work. In addition to her hospital work, she has charge of the training school and lectures in the medical school. Red Sea, March 28th. We expect to reach Suez on the 30th and Port Said on Tuesday. Our voyage from Bombay has been most delightful. No winds or storms to impede our progress. On the 6th day from Bombay, we arrived at Aden, where we remained 10 hours to unload freight and take on coal. Our steamer, the Oceanic, consumes 50 tons of coal a day, and the average run is 350 miles. There are over 300 people on board, 72 of whom are first-class passengers. Our missionary party of 11 sit together at meals and have our chairs near each other on deck and pass the time pleasantly reading, chatting, and writing letters. Mrs. Need has decided not to go to Palestine, but Miss Baucus and I will go unless our agent at Port Said advises us not to do so on account of cholera, which was prevalent in India when we left and may be in Haifa and Jerusalem. 29th. We had a very hot night and it is uncomfortably warm this morning. Mrs. Nin says she does not wonder that the Israelites wanted to turn back when they reached the Red Sea if it was as hot then as it is now. We have passed the 12 large rocks which are called the 12 Apostles. 30th. We reached Suez today and stopped to take on a pilot to take us through the canal. It takes 20 hours to go through as steamers go only from 5 to 7 miles an hour. The company pays at the rate of 10 shillings apiece for each passenger and a certain rate a ton for the cargo, and this steamer's payment will amount to $6,000 or $7,000. The sail through the canal has been very pleasant so far. I noticed some improvements along the line of the railway. The freshwater canal recently built by the Khedive from the Nile to Suez will prove a great blessing. The green fields that we see in the distance and the little houses which, though rude, look comfortable, add to the scene, and the mustard fields which are now in blossom enrich the landscape. We have just been on deck to get a view of the first Bitter Lake, through which we move faster as there are no near shores to wash away as in the canal. With my field glass, I get a fine view. I have never enjoyed a sail through the canal so much before. The sun is hot, but there is a cool breeze which makes it very pleasant. We shall soon reach Port Said, and there we shall take a steamer for Hapa. End of chapter 23. Recording by Sienna, Fresno, California. Chapter 24 of A Glimpse of India, from the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 3. Return to India, 1906 to 1908. Chapter 24, Return to India. Bareilly, January 2, 1907. My dear Dr. Mary, we sailed from New York on the 6th of November, and after a few days' rest once more left Liverpool for the land of the Hindus. After a pleasant voyage, we landed in Bombay on the morning of December 20th, and I went direct to Delhi, where I spent some days of quiet rest. Then I went to Moradabad to spend Christmas, arriving there on Christmas Eve in time to join a dinner party of 24 at Mrs. Parker's, including my old friends, Dr. and Mrs. Waugh, and several Americans who arrived in the country before we did. On the 27th, we all came to Bareilly, dear old Bareilly, where so many years of my life were spent. Great changes have taken place here. I see new faces instead of old friends. The trees which I planted have become immense, especially those which belong to the Banyan family. The mango grove, which we planted 22 years ago, is now in its glory, and the fruit must bring a good income for the dispensary. There are marks of improvement everywhere. The farming country is better watered, and some of the fields give promise of a bountiful harvest. The private secretary of the late Raja met me in Delhi. He was among the first to welcome me back to India. He is planning for me to see the dear little prince and his sisters if they can come to Jaipur. I cannot go to their homes as they are so far from the railroad. Bareilly, January 2, 1907. My dear Mrs. H., you asked me to write you a full account of the Jubilee, and I will endeavor to do so from the notes that I have taken. Early in December, about 50 visitors from America arrived in India to be present at the Jubilee, among them Bishop Fitzgerald and family, Bishop and Mrs. Foss, Dr. Leonard, Mrs. E. B. Stevens and daughter, and Bishops Thoburn and Oldham, and, to the joy of all, Mrs. William Butler with her son and daughter. Many of the visitors tarried on the way up country to attend the Southern conferences, but were on hand at the appointed time to participate in the opening exercises of the Jubilee, which took place December 28th and continued over New Year's Day, 1907. It was fitting that the Jubilee should be held in Bareilly, that being Dr. Butler's first home. 8 tents had been so arranged that a commodious auditorium was ready to seat the assembly, which some days numbered 3,500 people, including European and Indian Christians. After the opening hymn, Bishop Thoburn prayed in Hindustani, and the whole congregation joined in the Lord's Prayer in their several languages. Bishop Warren gave words of welcome from the entire Methodist mission and introduced the Nawab of Bareilly, who read a fine address of welcome on behalf of the municipality. Then occurred the introduction of the bishops and others by the older members of the mission with appropriate words of welcome. Mrs. Parker, who with Mrs. Butler organized the Women's Foreign Missionary Society in America 39 years ago, introduced Mrs. Butler to the audience, and Bishop Thoburn presented Dr. John Butler of Mexico and Miss Clementina Butler of Massachusetts. A reception was held in the evening in the Bareilly Palace of the Nawab of Rampur, who had placed it at the disposal of the committee for the occasion, and a large company of Christians, European, Indian, Burmese, and those from Malaysia and the Philippines, spent a delightful evening in getting acquainted with each other and in conversation and listening to fine music. The devotional meeting Saturday morning was largely attended, and in the forenoon there was an English service in the church and the Indian Christians held a service among themselves in the tabernacle. Bishop Foss, in the English service, held his audience in closest attention, giving a most inspiring address. He referred to his previous visit to India, saying, "9 years ago, I visited Naini Tal and looked out upon 53 peaks of the Himalaya mountains, a beautiful and wonderful sight, but it was not to be compared to what we are seeing at this Jubilee." Fanny Crosby had written a hymn specially for the Jubilee, which was sung with much enthusiasm, and then followed an incident of great interest. Dr. T.S. Johnson, who was presiding, asked that the members of the first conference in India come forward, and 6 veterans stepped forward, among them Bishop Thoburn. A reminiscence meeting was held after dinner Saturday evening, and early experiences of the missionaries excited much interest. Sunday was preeminently a Sabbath day. At 8:30 in the morning occurred a love feast with about 2,500 people, chiefly natives, seated in the auditorium. A few of the Europeans began to give their testimony, the native Christians following in rapid succession, sometimes half a dozen or more in different parts of the audience speaking at once, telling with beaming faces of what God had done for them. Those who were present on that Sunday morning can never forget the inspiration of that hour. When Mrs. Butler arose to speak, Caroline Mama, a dear old Hindustani saint, pressed forward and embraced her, and then another aged woman who was one of the first girls received into the Bareilly orphanage and the only one of that group now living, was called forward. She has been a faithful Bible woman for over 30 years, and she gave a glowing testimony to God's faithfulness. The descendants of Joel Janvier, Dr. Butler's first helper, were introduced, and there were 12 native men present who saw Dr. Butler when he came to India 50 years ago, who were presented to the audience. Such a love feast was never before seen, and many remarked, "I never saw anything to equal this." Bishop Fitzgerald preached the Jubilee sermon at the noon service, Nathaniel Jordan interpreting. The text was Hebrew chapter 11 verse 5. Enoch pleased God, and the discourse was an earnest and inspiring one. At the 5 o'clock service, Dr. Goucher and Bishops Thoburn and Oldham spoke on facing the future, giving many inspiring thoughts. The after-dinner social meeting was a fitting close to the holy day. Miss Butler read some extracts from her father's early letters, in one of which he mentioned his church of 4 members. The hopeful tone of these letters thrilled many hearts as we realized the fulfillment of his hopes. A deeply spiritual tone characterized the meeting, the presence of the Master being most manifest, his spirit brooding over the assembly. Monday was given to the introduction of the fraternal delegates with speeches from them and other visitors. Wesleyan Methodism, the Church of England, the American Society of Friends, the Baptist churches, the Presbyterian Churches of America and Canada, and the American Board of Foreign Missions were all represented by delegates, and their visitors from China, Japan, Italy, Australia, and the Philippines. Dr. Cregan, Secretary of the American Board, who is on a missionary tour, made the happy remark, "Ours, the American Board of Foreign Missions, is the oldest missionary society in America. I bring the greetings of the oldest to the greatest missionary board." Many letters and telegrams from bishops, missionaries, and friends who could not be present were received. A solemn watch night service, a benediction of consecration and power, closed the day and year. The first meeting of the new year was an inspiring one. It was an educational meeting in more senses than one. The shout went up, "Masi ki jai," victory to Jesus, as the audience realized the full meaning of what they saw and heard. There was a school of heathen boys taught by a Christian teacher, and the village school of Christian boys, both reciting Christian truths, but contrasting in personal appearance, the latter showing the influence of Christian family life. Mrs. Dees brought what she called her entering wedge, over 200 girls from the city schools, girls of different castes, some married, some widows, all quite ready with their answers to Bible questions. 50 of Mrs. Chu's little orphanage girls gave a doll's drill and sang "Sleep, Baby, Sleep" very sweetly. Then came a breeze from the Himalayas. Some of Miss Budden's Christian people had walked 90 miles through the mountains to the nearest railway station, a march of 9 days. They sang one of their songs, led by a blind youth. Dr. Sheldon's converted Tibetan boy recited a verse of scripture in his own language and sang a hymn with her, and the Nepalese boy recited in his mother tongue. Other phases of this educational work were a class of young women nurses from the Bareilly Hospital, the exhibition of specimens of industrial work, beds, chairs, woven wire mattresses made by the boys in the Shahjahanpur orphanage, and fine rugs, brass and woodwork from the Phalera Industrial Mission, which was organized during the famine of 1898. Mrs. Matthews' girls and women from the Aligarh Widows' Home wore clothes made from cloth of their own weaving. They work in the fields, raise grain and vegetables, make bread for the English residents, and have more orders for their beautiful pillow lace than they can supply. Under Mrs. Matthews' supervision, 40 of her well-trained girls did the cooking for the 350 guests and missionaries, making all the bread used and also serving the tables. A paper on commercial education was read by one of the Reed Christian College students, and there were songs and recitations by some of the young women of the Isabella Thoburn College. Professor J. R. Chitamber, son of a converted Brahmin, gave a fine address on what Christian education has done for me. The Reverend Ganga Nath of the Lucknow Mission Press spoke briefly of the work of the press. He is also of Brahman birth, and as a boy used to light the fires on the altar of heathen temples. Now he is sending the light of the gospel into heathen homes. The Epworth League rally on Tuesday afternoon, with its vast procession and various banners, was most inspiring. A prayer in Canaries was followed by a psalm in Hindustani recited in concert. Hymns were sung in various languages, and some fine papers by missionaries were read, the services closing with a recessional sung by the students of the Isabella Thoburn College. The closing exercises of the Jubilee on Tuesday evening, January 1st, were full of interest and were participated in by quite a number of the visitors. The large congregation of people from different countries and of different races sang the doxology with reverent spirit, and the benediction was pronounced in Hindustani by Bishop Thoburn. Only one tent is standing on the grounds this morning. Many of the visitors have left, some to return to America, others to visit other of our eastern mission fields. An interesting incident occurred at one of the evening services. 523 converts from heathenism were presented for baptism and recognition as Christians. Special prayer was asked for these candidates who had been previously instructed by Christian pastors. Bishop Thoburn prayed, and then occurred the ceremony of cutting off the sacred lock of hair, and the ritual service was read and explained. The cutting off of the chutia or sacred lock of hair from the crown of the head signifies the separation from idolatry. One native presiding elder brought over 300 candidates for baptism and said many more would have come if he could have arranged for them. 200 or 300 Hindus were close observers of this ceremony, and one remarked, "All the people will become Christians soon." Bareilly, January 9, 1907. In my Jubilee letter, I did not say much about the women who were present, but the Women's Foreign Missionary Society was by no means in the background. I mentioned that Mrs. Butler, wife of the founder of the mission, and herself the first woman missionary of our church to tell the women and children of India of a loving Savior, despite her 86 years, had dared to undertake the long journey from America that she might see and rejoice in the wonderful work of God in this land. When she appeared on the platform, she needed no introduction. The native Christians voiced their delight in her presence by singing heartily, "Glory, glory, hallelujah," as she took her seat. Bishop Voss spoke eloquently of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society, which is doing so much for the women of all lands, and gave Mrs. Butler credit for her part in the work in the society. Mrs. Voss made a very pleasing speech, saying that the society in America had sent her to India to give the greetings of that great organization. She spoke of its unparalleled success and encouraged the workers and the Christians by telling of the continued prayers of the women of America for God's blessing on those who love Him and for the Spirit's converting power on the hearts of those who are yet far from Him. She said, "I had no conception of the extent of the work here. It overwhelms me." Referring to the small beginnings of 1869 and the 2 missionaries sent out that year, she contrasted it with the present when the society supports 500 missionaries and owns over $1 million worth of property in foreign lands. As Mrs. Voss took her seat, Bishop Warren remarked that the Women's Foreign Missionary Society sent more money to India than did the General Board. It was a pleasure to have Mrs. Stevens and her daughter with us. Mrs. Stevens has been president of the Baltimore branch of the society for 30 years and has a deep interest in all the work. Mrs. Fitzgerald, Mrs. Warren, and Mrs. Oldham all had words of cheer for both workers and converts. I am sure you would have been interested in the papers given by some of the mission ladies. Miss Leelavati Singh read a paper on "The Future of Education for Indian Women," showing what had been accomplished in 50 years. Beginning with a few little girls, children of the mission servants, gathered into a school on the veranda of the mission house, with now a school system for the education of girls all over the empire. The Methodist Mission has 1,000 schools with, at the best computation, 10,000 girls in attendance, and other missions too count their girl pupils by thousands, and a large percent of the girls are Christians, she said. She showed the capability of the females of India in the fact that in the BA and FA examinations the last year, girls held the first place, and she told of the influence of Christianity on Hindu and Mohammedan women who are becoming morally and socially emancipated from the bondage of their former lives. Miss Budden, who has had large experience in evangelistic work, emphasized the need of consecrated Bible women to carry the message of salvation to the women of the towns and villages, and wished that we might have many more women trained for this special work. Dr. Edna Beck of Valera gave an account of the medical work and showed how beautifully the medical and evangelistic work supplement one another. Miss Blair's practical paper on literature for the women of India gave food for thought. While editor of The Woman's Friend in Bengali, she began to realize the need for pure literature which will be both interesting and profitable to the increasing number of readers among Christian and non-Christian women. A paper on Zanana work by Miss Nichols of Bombay was most interesting. The facts and incidents which she narrated stirred our hearts. Many are the women who, in their hearts, believe that the religion of Christ is to them salvation. One of the most effective agencies in our work is the school work, and Miss Anna Lawson's paper on boarding schools gave a review of the schools of our mission from the first established by Mrs. Parker, with 2 pupils, to the last one that came into existence. All our conferences carry on this form of work, and many trained workers have gone out from the schools as wives of pastors and teachers and are employed as Bible women, some of them giving nearly their whole time to village schools and evangelistic work. The Jubilee meetings were too immense in numbers and matter to be wholly enjoyable. We could not appreciate and digest so many good things in so short a time, but all, I am sure, carried away pleasant memories of the occasion with the thanksgiving in their hearts that so many of the people of India are being brought into Christ's kingdom. Ajmer, January 28, 1907. My dear Dr. Slade, I was glad to be able to attend the Northwest India Conference at Muttra. It closed on the 20th and I have been here a week. A letter of welcome and an invitation from the little Prince of Khetri and his sisters to visit them here brought me home with one of our missionaries who has the charge of a mission boarding school for girls. The young Raja called on me on Thursday. He is a fine lad of 14, tall and manly. He wore an English riding suit and a handsome turban. He greeted me very cordially and said he did not remember me, but he had my photograph with the baby in my arms, which he had been told was himself. We sat down together on the sofa, and I asked him if I might drop his title and call him by his name, Jai Singh, as it made my boy seem so far away to address him as Raja Sahib. He seemed quite pleased at this request. I talked to him of his childhood and told him some sweet little things about himself and some stories of interest about his mother. He read a page of English for me, and I find that he speaks English very well. He will graduate from the high school in 2 years more. His guardian, who was with him, is a B.A. He told me that the prince is good and noble, and that they hoped to keep him so, for in 4 years he will take his father's place. The prince is under very strict orders. He is not allowed to go outside the college grounds without permission, and then his guardian and an escort accompany him. His guardian seems a good man. He is a Brahman of the purest type. He called yesterday to say that the prince was unable to pay his respects to me before going to Khetri, where the ceremony of putting on the sacred thread will take place. The 2 princesses came on Saturday and spent the day with me before going to Khetri. They urged me to go with them, but I declined as I knew how tiresome the journey would be for me, and as the Raja and Rani had both passed away, I had no desire to go. They will return in 10 days and expect to spend some time in Ajmer. I am very much pleased with them both. The older one is a fine, handsome woman, much like her mother, so queenly in her manner and general appearance. The younger Bai is rather delicate. They both keep up their reading, and the elder Bai continues her music and painting. The brother and sisters are very fond of each other. I have one of my Khetri servants with me. The prince has given him permission to serve me as long as I remain in India. This is quite a comfort, for I need him, especially when I travel, for there are so many little things to attend to. This mission compound is a very busy place. Many of the schoolgirls recite their lessons out under the trees where it is warmer than indoors, so there is noise on all sides of the house. I am so pleased to see the improvement in all our mission stations. There are larger communities of Christians, better schools and church buildings, and a greater number of children in the day and boarding schools. In some of the villages, numbers of men and women are under instruction. 10 years has made a very perceptible change in our mission work. The great famines in this part of India have brought thousands of children into our mission stations, and it is a pleasure to see them well clothed and fed and being taught to lead useful lives. What a wonderful time we are living in! The more we see and study the workings of providence among the nations, the clearer we see how they are being led to recognize their Creator. I trust the prophecy will soon be fulfilled when all nations shall acknowledge Him as the ruler of the world. Ajmer is a pretty place surrounded with rocky hills from 8 to 1,500 feet high. There is a lake at the base of one of the highest hills, and a public garden on the opposite side with several marble pavilions, which look quite enchanting with the water for background and the green lawn in front shaded by wide-spreading trees. The monotony of the sandy plains of Rajputana is broken by hills in many places. Bombay, November 3, 1907. I very much enjoyed the Dasera meetings in Lucknow last month. These have been held annually for the last 25 years during the 3 days of Dasera, a Hindu festival, which is recognized by the government and gazetted as legal holidays. Missionaries from all parts of India and from Ceylon are invited to participate in these meetings, and many avail themselves of the opportunity to spend a few days in Christian fellowship and service. This year, a great many Indian Christians were present, among them some fine preachers from the Presbyterian Mission in Lahore. 3 services were held at the same hour every morning, one in English for Christian workers, one in the Hindustani church, and one for the young people of the Epworth League and Christian Endeavor Societies. They were all so interesting that it was difficult to decide which to attend. At 4 o'clock each day, there was a service for all who could attend, and also a service every evening. November 18th. The eldest Khetri princess, Bai Sahiba of Shapura, had intended to take a house in Ajmer for the winter where I could be near her and her brother and sister, but her husband changed his plans and I came with her to Bombay, where we have been for nearly 3 weeks. They rented a furnished house for themselves and arranged for me at Watson's Hotel, which is 3 miles from the Bai Sahiba's house. I drove over there every morning after breakfast and remained with her until after 4 o'clock tea, but the long drive through the crowded streets was rather tiresome to me, and I was very glad when I found that I could be received as a boarder in the Alliance Mission Home, which is much nearer to the home of the Bai Sahiba. We have just finished reading together The Life of Christ, a small book in Romanized Urdu written for Sunday schools, reading with it the corresponding accounts in the Gospels. Today, she was not satisfied until she had read from Matthew chapter 1 verse 18 to the end of the 5th chapter. Like her mother, Bai Sahiba is in sympathy with everything that is good. I am greatly pleased with the Christ-like spirit of the inmates of this home. A Christian Parsi gentleman, whose wife is just now in England, is boarding here at present. He became a Christian 30 years ago and has spent most of his time in preaching in the streets of Bombay and doing other Christian service as the way opens. The Methodist Mission is in quite another part of this great city, quite a distance from here. I am planning to visit Pandita Ramabai soon. There has been a special outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the girls of our orphanage recently. The Pandita has written an account of it. Some of the girls have received the gift of tongues, and Ramabai believes that these tongues are given for a sign to unbelievers among her people, that they may see and hear of God's wonderful works and repent of their hardness of heart. Some of the girls give God's message very clearly, and they sing hymns and praise God in other tongues as well as in their own language. Telgaon, Pune District, January 3, 1908. My dear Miss P., I am just now out in the country about 100 miles south of Bombay, where the South India Conference has a boarding school for girls. Miss Lawson, who is the missionary in charge of the school, invited me to spend Christmas with her, and I have quite enjoyed coming to this place, which is beautiful for situation and has a delightful climate. Pandita Ramabai's village is at Kedgaon, 45 miles from here. Miss Lawson and I went there last Saturday, and I remained until Tuesday afternoon. From what you have heard of this blessed woman, you can imagine the royal welcome that we received, just such as a true member of our father's family knows how to give. There are at present about 1,400 people sheltered, fed, clothed, and controlled through the faith and perfect trust of this one woman, brought out of heathenism and yielded to God, soul and body, seeking to know His will and then careful to do it. Ramabai was converted in 1883 and was baptized in the Church of England. She said, I had gone to England to study and fit myself for my life work, but it was several years before I found in Christ that which satisfied my soul. During the famine of 1897, she was led to open the work which has been so blessed of God. She says, I was led by the Lord to step forward and start this work, trusting Him for both temporal and spiritual blessings. I can testify with all my heart that I have found Him faithful. While in America, some friends who were interested in the welfare of the women of India promised to help Ramabai in her plan for work among the widows of her country, and on her return to India, she opened her home for widows in Bombay. The work in the beginning was purely educational, Ramabai having resolved that religious liberty should be given to the inmates of the home. But although no direct religious instruction was given, she daily read the Bible aloud and prayed to the only true God in the name of Jesus Christ, hoping that the women, seeing and hearing what was going on, might be led to inquire about the true religion and the way of salvation. After a time, the home was removed to Pune, and when more room was needed, it was again removed to the place it now occupies. The village is called Mukti, which means salvation. This has been the crowning visit of my stay in India. I thought the Jubilee gathering wonderful, and the Dasera meeting were glorious, and I enjoyed them all, but nothing that I have seen appeals to me as does this work of Pundita Ramabai. There is a large church building in which the whole community can be seated together on the floor. There are no chairs or benches except for guests and for the minister. We attended the Sunday morning service, which was indeed inspiring. The congregation were in their simple Sunday garments, clean and fresh, their faces shining from the inward peace of their souls. All were seated on the floor in rows as the 5,000 were seated on the ground when Jesus fed the multitude. I was reminded of that company as I looked upon this congregation who were truly fed in this service with heavenly manna. Miss Abrams, Ramabai's competent helper, conducted the service and called on one of the women to pray. She had prayed perhaps 3 minutes when a mighty spirit of prayer and praise came upon the whole congregation. As they all prayed aloud, the sound was like a rushing stream of many waters. Some were powerfully shaken, and I suppose spoke in tongues, but I could not distinguish as I do not know their language. This continued for some minutes, then they began to sing, and all became quiet as Miss Abrams arose to give out her text. She preached, I was told, an excellent sermon in Marathi, the language of the people in that part of the country. This exhibition of the power of the Spirit seemed marvelous to me, though I was somewhat prepared for it from what I had heard and from seeing something similar to it among the missionaries in Bombay. God is pouring out His Spirit and stirring the hearts of the people all over India. On Monday, I visited the different departments of the institution. There is a weaving establishment where about 500 of the girls are employed. The yarn is purchased in Bombay and the girls color it and prepare it for weaving, and the saris worn by the women and girls of Mukti are woven by their hands. As this is the Christmas vacation, the sewing class was not going on as usual, though all have a few hours of work daily. Miss Bacon, the sewing room teacher, showed me some of the work that is being done. There were collars and handkerchiefs in drawn work, tea cloths and tray cloths, embroidered table covers, and many other kinds of work. The frocks for the little girls are made by the older ones. Both boys and girls are employed in the printing establishment. There is a hospital and dispensary, both under excellent management, and the several kitchens keep many hands busy. I noticed in the grinding room that the wheat is ground by steam power instead of in the old way, between two stones. The houses are built in dormitory style, each containing a number of rooms or compartments. Those for visitors are simply furnished with a cot, a table, 2 chairs, and a cotton mat or dari beside the bed. A curtain shuts off the bathroom attached to each sleeping room. The church is a large building built of stone with board floors. The roof is of tiles sealed with corrugated iron held by wooden braces and brackets. The walls are the same outside and inside, chipped stone, without plaster or whitewash. During the week, it is used for school purposes. Ramabai sends out many of the widows who have been educated by her to become Bible women or teachers in other schools. Recently, she sent out 70 trained women to preach in a town where pilgrims come by thousands to bathe in the river and wash away their sins. The women live in the town and go out every day among the people to preach and teach and to visit them in their homes. At a short distance from the Mukti establishment is the farm colony where about 40 families are located. The wives of these farmers are women who have been educated and trained at Mukti. Ramabai says she likes to keep her women near her for the first year or two of their married life so that she can give them counsel and advice when needed. The fields need great care as water is not plentiful. Grain and vegetables are raised but not in sufficient quantity to supply so large a family, and they are obliged to depend on the weekly market day for whatever else is needed. It is delightful to see the cheerful, happy spirit which reigns in all the departments of this wonderful work. It is truly a model establishment. An American gentleman and his wife who were making a tour of the world visited Mukti, and he said, after going over the whole place, "I have seen the sights of India, the wonderful mountain peaks of the Himalayas, the exquisite Taj Mahal, and many other grand and beautiful things, but Mukti surpasses them all. Mukti is the crowning wonder of all." Bombay, January 8, 1908. Once more in Bombay, where I expect to remain until I sail for home in March. These are wonderful days all over the world. This morning, a Mr. Moorhead from southern India, who is a guest in the home, conducted prayers. Before going to prayer, he read extracts from letters which he had received from workers in different countries, all breathing the same spirit and expressing the desire for the fullness of the Holy Spirit. We have most interesting seasons of prayer and Bible teaching and manifestations of God's presence with us in every morning service. Many of my friends, as you know, thought that I was assuming a risk in undertaking the long journey to India at this time, but I am glad that I came, for the meeting with old friends among the missionaries and native Christians and others has given me great pleasure, and it has been most gratifying to see not only the material improvement but the spiritual growth in the mission in the past 10 years. One of the most encouraging marks of growth is the spirit of those who have accepted Christ and are now working earnestly for the salvation of others. The growing independence of the native church, too, is a matter of interest. The quiet rest of this Christian home has been to me a season of Christian communion and spiritual uplift, so that I feel stronger for my home journey because of my stay in this saint's rest. End of chapter 24. Recording by Sienna, Fresno, California. End of A Glimpse of India, being a collection of extracts from the letters of Dr. Clara A. SWAIN, first medical missionary to India of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church in America.